We are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Richert Belul, author of Say It Now 33 Creative Ways to Say I Love You to the Most Important People in Your Life. And I am here with these beautiful, beautiful people Brendan Knight, publisher of Mango, Alan Klein, author of Embracing Life After Loss, and many, many, many other books. Lily Dulan, author of Giving Grief Meaning, and we are here representing Mango Publishing with a wonderful Heart Wisdom panel. Welcome. So before we launch right into getting to hear from our authors and from Brenda, I wanted to just give a little bit of a context with some beautiful quotes I pulled from Alan and Lily's books. So today we are talking about navigating grief during the holidays. And I know myself, I know so many people right now who are dealing with loss of all kinds. And I'm sure that most of you do as well. If it's not you yourself in your life, that you're also maybe helping someone to navigate this. And the holidays can be such a wonderful time, and they can be such a hard time, especially when we're trying to navigate loss and we might be feeling isolated or alone in that. So let me tell you what Alan says from his book, Embracing Life After Loss. Alan says, after a loss, you are on a hero's journey. You are in unfamiliar territory and in an uncomfortable place. You've come to a major challenge in your life and a very dark place. You're battling unfamiliar forces, and as in the hero's journey, you will emerge with greater wisdom. It may not seem like it right now, but you too are a hero. And Ellen, I loved that. I just wanted to start with it because we're all heroes, just being alive, but especially living with loss.
Wow, that was beautiful. Did I write that? Oh my God, that was
It was,
wonderful.
I know. And then let me tell you, Lily, let me see if you recognize this.
Okay.
So Lily says, as strange as it may seem, I found a way to see Kara's untimely death as one of my life's greatest teachings. Although I would do anything to have her back in my arms, my life purpose was birthed through coming to terms with my loss and finding a way to use Kara's name to heal.
Hmm.
And two, right, the hero's journey right there demonstrated. And I
Definitely
just,
wrote that.
you definitely.
True. Yeah.
So I just wanted, before I had you introduce yourselves, I wanted to just bring this into the room as a place to start, that this really is a hero's journey to be a human being, to go through loss, to keep on going, to find ways through it and to meaning. And so, Lily, why don't we start with you? If you would be so kind as to introduce yourself. Maybe there are people who don't know about your book. Give us a little bit of background about why you wrote this book.
Hi, I'm Lily Dulan, author of Giving Grief Meaning. And welcome to everyone here, Sherry, Brenda, Alan. It's great to be together. I wrote this book for survival. I think we all need to tell our
Hmm.
story. And if I hadn't written this book, I would have died. That was the alternative for me because it is my voice. And I've learned a lot even since it's been published. I think often we feel alone in our grief, like no one can get in through the door. And through this book and through the response, I've it's connected me to the human tapestry. We're all making, I like what you said, Alan, about unfamiliar choices. I think we're all making unfamiliar choices right now because the world is not what we had imagined. And we're still in the throes of COVID and much, much more. So to continue to write, to continue to reach out, that's what keeps That's my hero's journey.
Oh.
And I love that Alan adds the humor. Kind of lightens. Yeah, I don't know. For those of you who weren't here, Alan brought a little surprise, which maybe he'll. Uh,
Oh,
uh,
now,
Sure
it's
now. Why not?
one of my trademarks. Yeah. And
Oh.
Sherry was saying she was feeling a little down. And I said, well, let me do this and see what happens. And of course, what happened, Sherry? You,
I instantly felt an uplift.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's what amazes me about this, it's such a silly little, rubber thing. And you don't have to know a joke. You don't have to know a funny story. You just put it on, and people around you, or you, if you look in the mirror, will probably at least get a smile on your face. So it's why I always have one around to light myself up and to lighten other people up.
Amazing.
Well, and Alan, it is true, and maybe this is a good time to have you introduce yourself because it is true that even with such a topic as embracing life after loss, you bring in your trademark uplift into this book. So you tell us in your own words about this book and why this book for you.
Right. So it's Embracing Life After Loss. And I think the subtitle says a lot about what the book is, a gentle guide for growing through grief. And I really like that it's a gentle guide because when my wife died at the age of 34, I I was really, needless to say, I was really grieving. I was upset. We had a 10-year-old daughter. I kept asking, how am I going to get on with my life? I didn't sign up for this. Why is this happening to me? All of those questions, I'm sure Lily, you answer or asked yourself some of those same questions when you lost your daughter. And excuse me, I I went to a therapist, and after the second session, I think he said, "Life is tough." And I thought, I know life is tough. I don't have to pay you by the hour to tell me that. And so I start reading grief books, and they were not much help. They were big, thick books that I didn't have the attention span actually to read at that time.
Mhm.
But what I read was how I'm going to feel terrible. I'm going to lose my appetite. I'm going to maybe be depressed. All of these things. I maybe can't sleep, all things I might go through grieving. And I thought, years later, I thought, why is there not a book on the market that gently would hold my hand and help me get through my loss? Something that was easy to read, that I can pick up almost anywhere, read some comforting, uplifting, nourishing words. Couldn't find that, so I wrote Embracing Life After Loss. And it has 5 different sections because my first book was The Healing Power of Humor. So I'm very much into lightening up almost anything, including loss. And so this book is 5 sections: losing, learning, letting go, living, and finally laughing.
Huh.
And it's a very simple, it just has little quote, my little kind of take on on the quote, and then some of my wisdom or wisdom from someone else. So it's very simple. Open it up anywhere, and you'll probably be uplifted. So
Yeah.
that's my little book.
Well, it's not really a little book because actually it's such a great, big, huge, helpful book, right? But I love that, I love that it's written in a way that it does make it so easy to digest in small bits for when someone's grieving and doesn't have that attention span. And we're going to come back to both your books and have you guys read a little snippet. But I just wanted to bring Brenda in and just say hi and Same thing, Brenda. Like, I would love to just have you introduce yourself and in the context of today and these wonderful authors, if you want to share anything.
Yes, well, I'm so happy to be here, and especially on this topic. I thought about like what I would bring in, and something that I never talked about before popped into my head. I'm the publisher of Mango and Canary Press, by the way. But like I've had previous jobs in publishing. That's all I know how to do is publish books because I love them. Then they help people. But like early on in my career in publishing, I remember I was excited because I got to present to the sales reps for the first time, and I had my list of books, and one of them was a grief book, Molly Famia book. We published her two of her books, and the head of the sales rep organization said, we're just not going to be able to sell many copies of that book because there's a couple things people don't want to buy books about, uh, age and grief. And I remember thinking like, he's wrong. But I did my best. I didn't let him sort of stop me in my tracks. And because she's also a very beautiful writer, as are both of um, and so I knew her book would maybe not blow out like as a bestseller, like out of the gate, but I knew it would help people and would endure over time. And so, sure enough, it did. Her book is called Safe Passage. And like it went on 80,000 copies, actually. I mean, I think it took like 5 years for that to happen, and this was many years ago, but that's quite honorable. And I think of grief books as like, well, they can be your lifeline for one thing, because like I've endured some intense grief, as have all of us here and everyone on the planet, I think. But like they're nightstand books, because like when you're going through grief, especially like in the first like years of it, the first throes of it, you can't sleep. You're lucky if you get like a half hour, a hour, 2 hours. So you have your nightstand book and you can pick it up and read the wisdom of somebody who's been through it and grown through it. And so I just knew that like that president of the sales rep organization was wrong, and he was. And one of the specializations that we do is books on grieving. We write a few, and each one is different and speaks to different kind of loss. Like in Lily's case, the loss of a child. In Alan's case, loss of a wife, etc. And of those are needed because like people are experiencing loss all the time. And what was really helpful is when it can speak to when you feel like, okay, I can relate to this book, I can relate to this author. They've been through what I've been through. You feel a kinship through the reading of a book that is written by an author who has faced grief, handled it, made their way, and grown through it. So this category I think is especially important to me, and it was I felt like it was sort of irony that like I was told by a man who's quite brilliant, don't even bother publishing these kind of books. They don't work. But I knew they're really important, and I knew they matter, and I hope to continue to cover this category with writers like Alan Lilly.
Wow. Thank you, Brenda. Go, Alan. Yeah.
Yeah, Brenda, first of all, I want to thank you for publishing grief books. Yeah, they are so important. And I don't know about you, Lily, but I get people coming up to me all the time. One woman, her son was killed in the war, and she picked up Embracing Life After Loss, and she said, I've been grieving for years now, and it's the first thing that helped me, face and get a little bit get through my loss. So they're so important. And I also want to dovetail on what you said, Brenda, about publishers being afraid sometimes of publishing a grief book, or even just uh, parts of a book that are grief. I remember when my Healing Power of Humor, I was writing it. I had a great editor. She said, keep writing. Then she left the company, got another editor. My book opened with the story of my wife getting a terminal illness at 31 and dying at 34, and how she had a great sense of humor, and how now that showed me that humor could help us get through anything because it helped me. Well, he said, no, you can, and we were in the galleys, and he said, you cannot open the book with that. You got to change the opening. And we had a big fight about it. And I insisted. I went to the head of the publishing company and I said, this is my story. This is why I wrote this book. This is why I'm in this field. We've got to open with this story. And luckily, the publisher agreed with me. But an example of how the editor, second editor, wanted to change it. And almost, I was a new writer. I didn't know I could fight with the editor, but I really had this gut feeling I needed to open with the story. That was my story and how it helped me get through. Her sense of humor helped me get through the loss. So I needed to have that, and luckily that's the way it turned out. But yes, Brenda, sometimes publishers do not want that.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah.
Well, good for you. I'm so glad you did. That was exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And yes, it's true that, like, some people, like, if something makes them uncomfortable, they just want to, like, turn aside. And I sort of think if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe face it.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
Brenda, right. Like, and that's why, I feel so grateful to be here. I was going to say in this room, but I feel like I'm in a room with you guys, to be in this room with you. Because to me, I've been having so many conversations with people. I've been leading some grief groups recently. And across the board, what I hear is I feel alone. I feel alone. I feel alone. And so whether it's having a book to read or something like this, where just to be able to listen to people talk about something that's a hard thing, so, it can be a hard thing to face, but there's a connectedness that happens, right? And so Brenda, I really support that idea of when it's hard, sometimes the worst thing to do is to hide and turn away from it, because then we're just
Mhm.
more isolated. Yeah.
Yeah. Sherry, I wonder if that's a lead in to the topic today about grief during the holidays, because a lot of people may feel
Mhm.
they can't celebrate the holidays because of their loss. And so they turn away from, uh, acknowledging the joy that is still there in the possibility of that in the holidays, even though they've lost someone.
Beautiful. Alan, I love that. I love everything that you just brought in, right? Because you're right. We did want to specifically talk about the holidays. And I also, maybe you want to say a little more about, like, that might sound to someone like, what? How to find the joy when I'm grieving? Is that even possible?
Well, when I was researching my book, this book and the Courage to Laugh, which is all about death and dying, also, um, I would ask people, the survivors, I would ask, how would you want the person, your loved one who has died, how would you want them to live your life from now on? And I would say almost 100% said I would want them to enjoy their life, to be happy, to remember me, not to cry all the time, maybe a little grief, but basically the bottom line was to go on with their life and have a happy, joyous life. And yet people, particularly around the holidays, start feeling guilty. you
Yeah.
know how could I laugh at a time like this? I just lost my loved one, or even memories of past joyous times together. And that may be the time to remember those wonderful times together, because the person's not there, but those memories. We
Yes.
always have those joyous, happy memories, and we can focus on that.
I love that, Alan. I love the idea. And for me, I'm kind of one of those middle of the road people where it's like, I've been with friends who are grieving, and it's like 1 minute we're laughing and the next it's crying, and then we're laughing, and it's like that it doesn't have to be like, oh, I can't grieve by crying, or I can't grieve by laughing because then I feel guilty, like I'm not honoring that person. But it could be all of it. Lily, what do you think?
I like to say sometimes we feel like we're buried and we've really been planted. And sometimes humor doesn't feel like a possibility. And for me, and I'll get to the acting as if humor is a possibility, acting as if the world is a good place, even when I can't feel it or I can't see it. And my hope is that this becomes the nightstand book for people, because it gently encourages me to take my own medicine when I'm not feeling it. We all have our down days, and grief, it's not linear. And I was recently watching some really bad television. It's not even mentionable, okay? I won't give it that justice, but the main character was a grieving mother. And that part of this very bad television that was so obviously written by men resonated, and it took me back. So we never know when that's coming. So the point is that we act as if humor is a possibility. We act as if it may not come. We may not be able to summon humor. I may not be able to summon humor. I certainly don't feel able to summon humor today. But without this work, without this collective, without the hope that I can through people like Alan Klein, really, without that hope, then I'm really lost. And I've given away the book that's in yellow, the small digestible book that you held up. I've given that away because of that.
Oh, thank you.
Because I feel like my book, I tell people it may take time. You have to be ready for it. You may not be able to read it in the early stages. It took me 8 years to write Giving Grief Meaning.
Yeah.
But I hope that people will buy it with that hope that one day I'll be able to open it and get through another chapter.
Lily, oh, sorry.
That's why there's so many books written. And thank you, Brenda, honestly, for giving this tapestry of books a shot. People are afraid of grief. People are afraid. And thank God there's so many books out there. Thank Goddess.
Lily,
go ahead, Alan. Go ahead.
Well, I love what Lily said about as if, because some days we just, can't, not just humor. I don't, that, but can't even function. Just getting around is difficult after, when you're in grief sometimes. But if you could just, my thing is, I have slightly different words for it. I talk about intention. Like say you wake up in the morning, maybe you put out your intention, I could do one lighthearted thing today. I can take one step to put my grief in perspective. Just one, but it could be, okay, I'm going to act once today I'm going to act as if I have some joy in my life, and just that little, sometimes that one step leads to the next and is so important. um, I often tell people who are grieving, who don't go out of the house, can you just get out of the house for 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Because if you sit in your room, crying all the time, um, you're going to stay that way, probably. So, and you never know when you get out of the house what's going to happen, who you're going to meet, what's going to happen. Maybe that one joyous thing will happen, when you go to the grocery store for 5 minutes. So, yeah, I love that. Act as if, or set your intention to change. You need to change the grief path somewhat. Not that grief's not important, it's incredibly important.
Can
But
I
at
speak to changing the
some
grief?
point you have to move on. Yeah.
Because that's why I created the name work. Really, it sets the bar high for all of us, because by using the name of our choice, we are filling that name with intentionality. So
Mm.
for me, I chose to use Kara's name, and it's a sacred pact. I chose qualities in her name to live by. Her name was spelled Kara. And the qualities I found are kindness, alignment, regeneration, and action.
Oh,
So if I'm not
beautiful.
living there, if I'm not wanting to leave the house, I can be like, well, would that be kind to me to not leave the house?
Mm.
Um, and to affirm that the universe is aligned. Again, that's another way of acting as if. Acting as if it will be okay. So I have her name now, and I encourage other people to play around with names and construct affirmations through names and live intentionally through names, as a way of, it tethers me to life. Her name tethers me to life, because I wouldn't personally want to sully her name. It's the same thing that Alan, that you were saying about what that person would want from us. Would she want me
Right.
to, beat myself up over the brain fog I still experience from suffering that loss, or to affirm clarity and move forward and show up on a day that I don't really feel like showing up? That's part of doing the work and summoning the gratitude that publishers like Mango, eh, Brenda, really and truly give voice to this. Because without this work, what's the alternative? It's either move towards life, live your hero's journey, or surrender to an alternative that isn't pleasant. I hate to be, and that's where, maybe some people like, wow, this is too heavy. Like, we need the humor. We need wavy gravy.
Alan, quick, put your nose back on for us.
Quick, 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 quick. Here we go. Here we go. Okay.
So you guys, so this is so great, because what's coming up for me is an essential question that for myself I always grapple with, which is when, like, we all know it's important to let the feelings move through us and to feel the grief. And as we're all talking about, it's not helpful to get stuck there, or sometimes the most helpful thing is to see someone put on a red nose and to smile. And it's like, do you guys have any tips on how people can, especially when there's the brain fog or just the exhaustion from grief, how to know which of those paths to take in any given moment?
Um, we can answer that in a moment, but I don't want to point to go away that Lily was just talking about. By keeping your daughter's name with, I forget what you call it, but
The name
using the
work.
letters, name what?
the name work.
The
So
name
it's
work.
the
You
name
keep,
work.
yeah, you're keeping her memory alive.
Mhm.
And I think that is so important.
Mhm.
And I know my daughter was 10 when her mother and my wife died. And we still talk about, her name was Ellen, and we like Christmas is coming up. And Ellen used to make an incredible cranberry, English cranberry pudding with rum butter sauce.
Mm.
We still talk about that every Christmas, you know. And when my daughter was 10, but I made a point, and it was just unconscious. I didn't know to do this, but to not like push the death aside, to talk about it whenever Ellen's name came up, or if something came up we didn't know what to do, I'd say to Sarah, well, what would mommy do? And
Oh,
then we would, so it's keeping that person's name alive. And actually, when we do some reading later, I think my quote is about that. So what were you asking, Sherry? I totally forgot.
well, good. No, no, no. I'm so glad. Alan, thank you so much. That was beautiful and so very important. Yeah, so what I was asking was because the conversation was going in these directions of like, it's important to feel our feelings. And sometimes it's important to go outside or let joy happen to us or find some new way of being in order that we don't get sort of stuck in it. And I was just curious if you guys had further thoughts about, when someone's exhausted and in brain fog and, grief, how to know which of those to do. Do I just, force myself, I guess is the question.
Service for me.
Mm,
That's been the path
okay.
of acting as if it's moving into service even when I don't want to be there.
Oh,
It's putting one foot in front of the other, keeping the car on the road. I had a therapist say that to me. Just keep the car on the road, Lily.
Oh,
But it's the truth. It's keeping the car on the road and then finding a way out of self enough. And for me, that's been doing service in Kara's name.
wow.
I mean, for me, I ended up going to Nepal to visit an orphanage, a, a group home now, excuse me, group home. Um, and that kind of tethered me back to life. But it can be as simple as bringing blankets to the overcrowded shelters.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it may not lift it, but it may lift it for that little moment. Um, for me, that's been it. And I find it serendipitous that um, you wear the clown nose. It makes me think of Wavy Gravy, and that was his
right.
path out of
Yeah.
sadness. And
Yeah. And Lily, I so agree with you. I said my book has the 5 L words, and one of them is living. And in there, I talk about volunteering. And I
Hmm.
remember after my wife died, I became a hospice volunteer.
Wow.
And people say, "How can you do that? That's so sad. You're working with the dying, you're working with the grieving." And I'll tell you, it was the best thing I could have done because I learned so much from the people that were dying and the people that were grieving. And I felt I was really contributing. I had been through this experience, so I could sit with those who were grieving and listen to their story and maybe tell them my story. And so we'd bond together. Um, so, and it got me out of the house, I had to,
Kept the car on the road.
that's right.
twice a week, I had to go to the,
Wow.
hospice office. And yeah, and it just saw how it helped other people. And when you help other people, it helps you. So totally agree about, you may not have called it volunteering, but some other word, but it's saying service. I think you said service. Yeah. Do service for others, and you start to get out of your whatever you're going through.
At the
So go ahead, Lily, go.
also joining in community at the onset of COVID, I've been interested in learning to chant. And some people may be memory impaired at the early stages of grief, and that's not a possibility. But the fear and grief around COVID, by that time, I could do something like that. And I joined a chant group and memorized um, memorized a chant in a dialect of Hindi,
Wow.
verses. Um, but sometimes that took me out of myself. And it's called the Hanuman Chalisa for anyone who's interested.
Mhm.
But Hanuman in Hinduism is the god of service. So for me, that was another way to tether me to living. So whoever you are, whatever your background is, whoever's listening, it's finding those avenues that tether us to living intentionally, to connecting to life. And it grows and it evolves. It's probably the reason you, Alan, have written so many books at this point.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to ask a question?
Of course.
I'm just curious to know how you've evolved since book number 1. I mean, do you find it's like a growing, moving?
Yeah, well, when I'm writing, and I think a lot of creative people are like this, when you're writing one thing, a number of ideas will come flowing in that maybe doesn't fit in that book, right? So it's oh, look, this might be, or a number of ideas, this might be another book. Healing Power of Humor. I was collecting all these quotations about humor, laughter, play, happiness. I had hundreds of them. And one day I thought, well, this might make a good book because I didn't use these, I just used a handful. And so that became another book. And then that led to another quotation book. And then Brenda and I met and published some of those. Some were reprints, some were original. I don't know. One thing for me, creativity wise, um, my brain just keeps creating stuff. I'm going to be doing a closing keynote presentation. Surprised that I'm still speaking at my age next year at the Yuma conference, because they asked for proposals, and I thought, what if I put together my Healing Power of Humor, my first book, with my last book, which Brenda published, The Awe Factor, and what is their connection? And I
Ooh.
thought, this is brilliant. And I start jotting down like 5 connections. And then I thought, well, I'll be they'll want me to do a breakout session, so there's not much pressure. And then I get a thing, we'd like you to be our closing keynote speaker. And now I don't have an hour's keynote speech. So I got to put it together, but it'll happen, I just know. And it just fascinated me that there might be some connection there. You ask, how does this happen? One thing just seems to, at least in my crazy mind, follow another.
Sounds like a lot of flow. I wanted to bring up something because when Alan was about volunteering at hospices and listening, to people who were experiencing dying. I had done a lot of reading, for my work, like I obviously read all the time, and then some things will speak to me, and I feel to like dive in further. And so I feel like it was maybe 5 years back, I was reading about like what nurses and doctors hear from people at the end of their life. And it's never like, oh, I wish I worked more. I wish I had more money. Oh, I wish blah, blah, blah. It's always like, I wish I spent more time with my loved ones. I wish I had shown the love I have. I wish I had shared my love that I have more. I wish I had helped people more. And so I thought that completely makes sense. Actually, this week I was doing some writing, my own personal writing, and I talked about at the end of your life, like, you need to think about the end of your life now. What do you do, and like, what are the regrets you don't want to have? So like, make sure you tell the people that you love how much you love them all the time, as Sherry's book instructs you to say it now. And then also help others, like, and I'm pretty sure that is the only reason we're here on the planet, is those two
Oh,
things:
wow.
love and
Mm.
service.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you, Brenda. That's so, so beautiful. And I think just one thing that I would add to that that always comes up for me is connection, right? So that it goes hand in hand with those things, which is I feel like we all really want to feel connected. And I was thinking about when you guys were talking about service. One of my ritual services is to write letters to strangers who are grieving or ill, and they don't come from me, they just come from the universe, but it's a way for me to connect. So inevitably, as life has it, this year especially, I was going through my own grief, but to write letters to people, love letters, and support letters, it provides that connection. And there's something about, again, I know we started with this, but I'm coming back to that too, which is that, we're not alone. We're not alone. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
She said,
I just, yeah.
go ahead.
I just, because we're talking about hospice. I mean, I learned a lot from the people I work with, the patients and families. But one of the things that astounded me, I had 3 different patients right near within 24 hours of their death. They all wanted to go up. One, I want to get up. I want to get up. And I said, do you need to go to the bathroom? No, no, I just want to get up. I want to get up. And the other one kept saying, I want to take a drive around the block. I want to get up and take a drive around the block. And I forget what the third one said, but it amazed me that it was like, on some levels, they knew this was it. And the spirit maybe transcending and rising. I don't know.
You want to keep the car on the road.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up and like hear from Lily and Alan, and you too, Sherry, is that I think the holidays bring up a feeling of guilt, like for survivor guilt. I know that was true for me, and I have a very important teenage girl in my life who lost her mother like a couple of years ago, and she's still in pretty deep grief. And her mother, like, the holidays were big for, her mom like put on like the best possible Christmas. And so I think Christmas just feels like weird and sad, and like she doesn't even know what to do with it. My instinct is like to fill in the blanks and try to like, compensate and blah blah. But I know that that's not really right. So how do we help people who are just I think they just feel guilty and like and like rudderless during the holidays.
Right. Well,
I
one
think
thing, I had a great teacher who taught me, and he said, to want what you don't have is to waste what you do have. So one, remind that they still have the memories of that person, but they could also, do stuff that the joyous stuff they did with that person, they might be able to still do some of that. I know my in-laws used to make crab cioppino every Christmas. And so
Mm.
my daughter now on Christmas Eve, she makes crab cioppino
Yeah.
and it's in like their honor. And yes, they're not here, the physical body's not here, but they're carrying on any tradition that the family or you had with that person. You might still be able to do that. Um, so kind of focus on what you still have, not on what is lost.
And then also acknowledging that it may never look like that and there will always be grief. It may never look the same as it was.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And there will be grief around that. And while simultaneously like honoring that and then creating a new tradition, not to replace, but again, to tether me to life.
Mm.
Um, okay.
Yeah.
Um, I had someone who wasn't going to be able to decorate her tree in the way it just didn't make sense to have the full
Mhm.
regalia out and going on.
Right.
Right.
But she ended up finding a smaller tree and buying some new ornaments, which is a possibility for her, and creating, and then going on vacation, going somewhere new, finding something different to do. Never going to
Mm.
replace the old times, not going to replace that. But again, taking a step towards something else. And again, it's a service. I know
Mhm.
many people who've lost family and loved ones who've gone to serve food to those who may not have food, and it's never going to replace that. But
Mhm.
it's another way of saying the same thing that Alan is saying. It's just coming around it in another way. And thank you for letting me veer off. I've just been dying to get on a panel with you, Alan, and
Oh, wow.
see. Yeah,
No,
no,
you
I
thank
just
you,
had that.
Lily.
Yeah. So
I
Wow.
want to echo those things, but of course, with it's the same thing, right? But of course, how the way that I see things is through gifts, right? Through gift giving, and so it's a similar thing, right? So like a good friend of mine, when her grandmother had passed away, and her grandmother was the Christmas maker, right? She was the one who did everything, and she said all of the rituals, and my friend, she put together tiny little recipe books from the Christmas dinners so that everybody could, in honor of their grandmother and the matriarch of the family. But it's like to funnel, I think in some ways that's what we're saying too. It's like to funnel the grief into what Alan keeps saying is the joyful memories. And I also, of course, encourage people to make love lists together, and really, which is again something that brings in all of those joyful memories. And can we bring them in the forms of gifts, maybe print up photographs that we have that maybe nobody else has of the person who's passed away,
Mm.
and to bring, because we all know this, right? Too, we all know that it's like when we're grieving, we want to talk about the person, we want to celebrate them, we want to love them. And so whatever we can do to bring that in. Yeah. Brenda, what do
Yeah,
Mhm.
you
my wife loved Christmas. In fact, one year we had two Christmas trees because we went out to cut one. We're going to cut a tree down, and it was kind of scrawny, it wasn't the perfect Christmas tree lot tree, and we went out and bought a floor to ceiling. We had 10-foot ceilings at that time, tree, and totally decorated and beautiful. But now my daughter still wants that, but she has a small tabletop tree, and new ornaments, but also ornaments that her grandmother
oh
would put on the tree and her mother put on the tree. So, um, still keeping that tradition alive. And as you said, Lily, maybe even introduce some new things to
Mhm.
it.
I think
Yeah.
it's a beautiful practice to letter write to people who need it and to say it. I want to go back to that. Again,
Mhm.
getting out of the self
Yeah.
feels so important.
One
Yeah.
I'd like to share because it was just happened last week. For about the last 8 years, every Thanksgiving, we send a check to someone. Sizable check. It depends what you think sizable is, but anyhow, um, we don't tell them. We just send it, and we have a little note that says, every year we send a little gift to someone who has inspired us in some way,
Hmm.
and the joy we get from doing that is so, and the joy the person when they open that envelope. I mean, the person this week said he's putting it on his bulletin board. He doesn't know when he's going to cash it because it just brings him such happiness and joy
Oh,
that. So just doing for others, particularly at the holidays when you may not feeling like you want to celebrate, help someone else, and I think it'll help you.
yeah. I'm just aware of the time and I want to see, it may not be right. I know you both brought things to read and it may not even feel like, oh, let's just keep talking. I don't want to read this. Or it may feel like, oh, this is the perfect time. I just wanted to check in with you each to see.
Well, because of the time, I would just like to read the opening quote to what I was going to read because it
Okay.
ties back to something we said before, and it's a Jewish saying. When we die 3 times. First, when our brain ceases to function. Second, when our heart stops beating. Third, when our name is no longer spoken in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Ah, yes. And so perfectly aligned with Lily's work. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if I brought this up, but it takes 30 years for a cactus sometimes to come into bloom. I think I did. But it's important to remember that it, I I like to hold on to the affirmations I learned through my time with Michael Beckwith. We have to choose. I choose to grow rather than to shrink uh, from adversity, and the seed needs the darkness, to change into new life. Not everyone. It's okay to be in that space of incubation, and in time things shift, and
Mhm.
maybe that's why grief isn't popular. There's no timeline, and
Right.
there's no like way to tie it up in a pretty little ribbon and bow and usher a person through that intensely intimate experience. um, that's what
Yeah.
I've got. I wish
Mhm.
that I had the panacea. I don't. But again, that this would be a nightstand book, and that
Mhm.
maybe, just maybe, an affirmation or two might be the affirmation that tethers someone to life.
Mhm.
That's all we can do. Ram Dass said, there's this one of the founders of hospice, and today is either the birthday or the death day of his teacher. It's very interesting.
Oh,
That feels like synchronicity
Mhm.
to me. But Ram Dass said we're all just walking each other home. So
Right.
Mhm.
that's what these things do, is someone tunes in And there's one little nugget there that
Right.
might
Mhm.
for someone. I mean, that's all we can do as human beings, really.
I have a Ram Dass quote
I
that
love that you have. I think I did see that. Now I'm remembering that.
so
Oh,
I had a bookmark here, and I remembered it was Ryan. You just mentioned him, so I'll
yeah.
read. It's very short. When someone we love dies, we get so busy mourning what died that we ignore what did not.
Oof.
Mhm.
Wow.
That is amazing. I'm
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
that one with
When sometimes when somebody like is like first day, in grief, like calling to let me know, their loved one died or something, I remember a statement he said to me that was almost the single most helpful thing of all, which was, love never dies. People do, but love never dies.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Brenda, thank you for saying that. That's a huge philosophy of my own too, right? And I think it's what
Mhm.
we've all been saying in so many different ways, right? To stay focused on, what is still here as much as we can is so important. And the love, I try to always also put it in present tense, because the love is not, it's not past tense. We didn't, love them then. We love them
Mhm. Right.
always,
Mhm.
so beautiful. I see
I would
we
just,
go ahead,
yeah,
Alan.
I'd just like to say something because we're getting near the end for listeners that I think we packed a lot in the last hour, and some things may not fit for some of the people. And my thing is, I always take what fits and I leave the rest behind.
yes.
So, anyone listening, if you just got one thing to help you with your grief or help you with your life, I think we'd all feel we've done our job. At least I have. But do realize that not everything will fit or work for you. And if it called out to you, if it called your name and you say, yeah, I could do that, go do it.
I love that, Alan, because what I was going to say was almost like the other side of the coin, which is interesting. So, what I was going to say is that I'm going to post the links to your books below these replays. And that even though what your books may be focused on, might be a death of a wife or a death of a child, and I may think like, well, that's not the same as mine. I've found great solace in simply being immersed in your books, even though my grief right now is totally different,
Mm,
And so what I also wanted to say is that don't ever, my encouragement is not to ever let the content of a grief book get in the way, because in so many ways the process is very, very similar. And I think we've been talking a lot about process here. Yeah.
mhm. Agreed.
Brenda,
Yeah.
Brenda, did you want to say anything to close us out today?
Well,
Me?
many of
Oh,
the
Brenda.
what Lily and Alan are writing in their books is absolutely universal. I mean, I know that like I was going through the loss of a spouse, like when I was reading Lily's book, and related the whole I related to the whole story and like everything about it. And Alan's book was enormously helpful to me as well. So they were both nightstand books for me. And I think that they can be for others because, when you wake up at 4 in the morning and like you just can't stop thinking and like pick up a book. You might Ram Dass speaking to you from the beyond. You might like there's any number of like helpful advice and tidbits, and they're all lifelines. They're all lifelines.
Thank
Right.
And
you.
it's so beautiful. I don't know if you can see this, Brenda, but you have some sort of like divine
Light
light source behind you.
with an eye.
Right?
I know.
I
It's
just
Ram Dass.
honestly, I can't help but think like it's like, some sort of like divine blessing happening for us of like, yes.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take all the blessings. I need them all.
Yeah, grab a lifeline. Grab a lifeline. I think
But
that's
the love is there when they're not there. They're with us. Ram Dass said, God is in the imagination and the imagination is in God.
Oh,
So like looking for those linkages and looking for those connections. I love knowing I was a nightstand, that this was a nightstand book for you, Brenda.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that we saw it through,
Right.
during a tender time. It means
Mhm.
so.
Well, I
I'll
think we're
always,
all aligned in our intention here,
yeah,
to be of service, to help people, like,
mhm.
to get like through that tough road and walk each other home. And I know that many of our listeners and people here will get a lot of, there's lots of food, just lots of food here.
Yeah. I hate to close this out because, I just feel so comforted and uplifted by being with you. And even though it's a hard topic, but I hope that other people will buy your books, will listen to this, will pass it on. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, all of you.
Thank
Alan,
you, all of
Thank
you.
you.
mwah.
Thank you.
it is like an eye. It's like the light moving
Uh,
up.
I know. I always feel like we shouldn't close out this live stream because there's something happening magical, but
Right.
Love it.
love you all. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
Nice meeting you,
everyone.
Alan.
Bye. Great
I wish
meeting you. Bye,
you day.
Brenda. Bye,
Thank you,
Sherry.
Sherry, for thinking of me.
Oh,